Revenge films.
I was working as a receptionist at a certain hospital. In this particular hospital where I worked, on the usual days off, every department would have what we called a holiday duty doctor. That day, I was on holiday duty, and I was working the reception with one of my female senior colleagues. However, knowing that I had to spend the entire day working with this particular colleague had put me in a negative mood from the start of the day. That was because she could always put the blame on anyone else, even if it was very clearly her own mistake. She would always be rude to patients and treat them with terrible customer service. And she would talk badly about the patients loudly enough for everyone else to be able to hear her. These patients were coming to the hospital because they were either sick or not feeling well, and yet she would harshly speak to them as if it was their fault. I was always put in a bad mood anytime I had to work with her. And it wasn't just me, she was also disliked by the other receptionists as well as all of the other nurses. That being said, work was work, and so I put my head down and started my job that morning next to this senior colleague of mine. However, that afternoon I had gone to the back to do the office work while she handled the reception. When a man arrived with a very exhausted-looking boy, probably around preschool age.
"My son has a fever of 100 degrees! Please let him see the doctor!"
He asked. At that time, my colleague was sitting at the desk, and after letting out a large sigh, she said, "You know you should have called ahead." And saying things like, "Why don't you just go to a regular family doctor when they open tomorrow?" Without an inkling of sympathy. In response to my colleague, the father desperately insisted.
"My child is suffering from a very high fever. A regular doctor is in an office today. And when I looked it up, I saw this hospital was open in the holiday duty doctor today. I apologize for not calling ahead. However, you're open today for these exact reasons, and you still won't let my son be seen by the doctor? If not, then please tell the hospital director that Stephen Skidmore is here."
The child definitely didn't seem well, and you could tell with one look that he was feeling really rough. And yet my colleague sighed again and ignored the child as she rolled her eyes at the father. Why are you ignoring them when there's a child there that clearly needs help? My colleague had absolutely zero intention of helping this father and his child, so I stepped in. "I'd be happy to take you guys over here. Would you mind filling out this paperwork with just the main necessary information?" I ushered them over to the other side of the reception desk, and the father's child said,
"Thank you very much!"
as he shook my hand with relief. Suddenly, the child must have got nauseous out of nowhere and threw up on the spot. When my colleague saw that, she had a disgusted look on her face and said, "Are you serious? That's so gross, and it smells awful. This is exactly why I said you should just go to your own doctor tomorrow. Please hurry and clean it up," she said as she turned her back to us. Even the other parents around the room were shocked by her reaction. I felt like she had really crossed the line, so I turned and said, "There are patients around us, you know." And she only had one response. "And?" The father was apologizing profusely for his child, unintentionally vomiting everywhere. But even the other patients stepped in to support them, saying,
"Don't worry about it. It happens to the best of us. Your child must be feeling really sick."
and were doing their best to cheer them up. One of the nurses came out, and I helped her to clean it up. When I returned to the reception, "Hey, can you not come over here? I can smell it even from a mile away." She stopped me a few feet from the desk. On top of that, "I can't believe you actually cleaned that up. If you touch something like that, you know you're going to get sick too." I had finally reached my limit, and despite the fact that we were still in front of other patients, I sternly said back to her, "This is a hospital. You need to be more careful with your words, and there is a chance that a child has something very serious and needs to be treated immediately." When I said that, my colleague looked over at the father and his child and shrugged. "It's obviously just a cold, and that idiot parent is overreacting. We're exhausted over here with so much work coming to us every single day. I wish they would just stop adding to our workload for something so small. And who does he think he is asking us to tell the doctor that some Stephen Skid whatever is here? Why would the director care or know anyone like that anyway? If anything, isn't he embarrassed trying to name drop himself like that?" And went on a rant for everyone to hear. Because all the other patients were around us, I couldn't raise my voice either. Holiday duty doctors are there for emergency purposes, which means it's very common for irregular patients to show up. Plus, as a simple receptionist, my colleague had absolutely no right to try to diagnose a patient, much less denying them the right to see a doctor. It's not even like you're going to be treating the patient yourself, so why does it bother you so much? My frustration was truly reaching its peak when suddenly the child started having a seizure. I ran to go get the nurse and the child was immediately escorted inside. At that moment, with perfect timing, the hospital director had just come downstairs, and he saw the father and child.
What happened? My son's fever wouldn't go down, so I brought him to the hospital. I thought maybe you might be here too, but then this person!
The father spoke to the hospital director as he glared over at my colleague. She whispered, "What? You actually know the hospital director? This has to be a joke," as her face turned completely pale. The child was the priority, so the hospital director went with the father into the exam room to check on the child and disappeared from the waiting room. It turns out that the little boy had meningitis and was immediately checked into the hospital. He was transferred to the pediatric ward on a stretcher. After a while, the father and the hospital director came back down from the pediatric ward together. By that time, most of the patients had left and the hospital had become quiet. The hospital director walked straight over to my colleague and looked her directly in the eye.
I heard from my friend Mr. Skidmore here that you had quite the attitude earlier.
So it was true that he was a friend of yours, Director.
Not only is he a friend, he is the president of the company that supplies this hospital with some of the most important medical equipment.
No way!
I heard from Mr. Skidmore, but why don't you explain to me why you refused to accept his son into this hospital?
He asked my colleague, to which she replied, "Well, it just didn't seem like he was actually that sick or that it was a serious condition." She tried to explain herself but was flustered, and it was all a string of excuses. The hospital director lost it, yelling,
That's not for you to decide at all! Who gave you any right to make that call? And more importantly, you're not a nurse and definitely not a doctor. So how would you even know? Were you trying to kill the child?
No, of course not. This wasn't my intention at all.
Because of your uneducated judgment, we were about to lose a young child, and his blood would have been on your hands. Do you have any idea what you've done?
I'm terribly sorry. I'm sorry.
There's no need for someone like you in this hospital. Go home, now!
The hospital director had fully raised his voice at this point, and my quivering colleague had gotten down to her knees. "I'm so sorry, please forgive me," as she apologized profusely through her tears. After that incident, about a week had passed, and the child of the hospital director's friend had fully recovered, but by that time my colleague was long gone. After that incident, the hospital director looked into my senior colleague in detail, speaking to the other receptionists and the nurses as well as the doctors, as more and more complaints and incidents came to light. On top of that, he found out that she had been prioritizing her family and friends and changing their reception times forward, as well as pushing back patients that she had decided she didn't like. As a result, there was a situation where a patient who had seemingly light symptoms was left waiting for so long that she was in critical condition by the time she was seen by a doctor, and we found out that her actions could easily be sued as neglect. Of course, the hospital did not forgive her for this. In reality, on the days that she was working reception, the patient feedback box would be stacked nearly 3 times the usual amount with complaints. However, the person that would usually be working the same shift as her would be a junior colleague, and one of them saw her throwing away those complaint papers before anybody else could see them. She had been keeping it to herself all this time, but she finally exploded and told the hospital director everything. Because of her, a lot of patients lost their faith and trust in our hospital, and I heard that the hospital decided to take her away to court for it. Of course, she didn't stand a chance, nor did she have any grounds to stand on, and despite turning completely pale, there was nowhere for her to escape. Once this senior colleague was laid off by the hospital, another senior colleague who always took her side also quit, and we all celebrated. And it wasn't just the employees. When our patients found out that she was no longer working at the hospital, "That woman's not here today? What? Oh, yes, due to some reason, she's quit the hospital." "Oh, well, is that so? I always felt uneasy around that woman. I know I shouldn't say this, but I'm quite glad to hear that." We had numerous people share the same opinion, and it made me realize just how terrible she had been to so many patients over the years. When that father and son from that incident were discharged from the hospital, they came back over to see me.
Thank you very much for stepping in at that time. Thanks to you, my child's life was saved.
Oh, please, I was just doing my job. If anything, I should be apologizing to you for my colleague's behavior, and that it took us so long to have your child be seen by the doctor. In order to ensure that something like that never happens again, we are doing company-wide trainings as well. Please take care, both of you. We exchanged our thanks with one another as they left. Sure, a hospital receptionist doesn't have the ability to save somebody's life like a nurse or a doctor could, but it's still an important role as the first person that the patient interacts with when they arrive at the hospital seeking help. My senior colleague didn't understand the responsibility of the job, nor did she take pride in her work, and I really hate her for it. I later found out that she was sued by the hospital for an unimaginably high cost of damages. But for someone who didn't understand the value of people's lives, nor care for their health, I thought it was a perfectly fitting punishment.
6 months ago, my husband and I built a house together for our family. My mother-in-law has a very calm personality. She's always been very kind to me and was a great mother-in-law. And whenever we would go out, she would of course spoil my baby. But she was always good to me too. My father-in-law, on the other hand, I had never been able to read, and I could never tell what he was thinking. Our newly built house was my dream home and my absolute treasure. I cleaned it every day so that it would always be spotless, and I did my best to keep it that way at all times. However, shortly after building it, I started to have certain concerns. At the root of those concerns was my father-in-law, who was frequently coming over to our house. When my husband and I were debating whether or not to build our own house, my mother-in-law put in a good word for us in her neighborhood, and we were able to get land at a very affordable price. Thanks to her, we were able to spend more money on the house itself, and as a result, we got our own dream home with almost everything we wanted. But because our houses were now close to each other, my father-in-law started coming over often. He would come over at times when my mother-in-law was out of the house and my husband was at work. And when he did, he would promptly sit back and say,
Hey, have you no respect? Your father has arrived, so hurry up and cook, you shameful wife.
and he yells at me. Yes, right away. I apologize. Because he is my father-in-law, I was never able to talk back, nor could I talk to anyone about my situation. Even when I would cook for him, my father-in-law would only complain about the food.
You call this food? This is awful. How can anyone eat this?
And forcibly throw it all into the sink. I had known for a while that my father-in-law didn't like me very much. That's because my father-in-law had wanted my husband to marry a different woman and had gone so far as to arrange the marriage for them. That woman was the daughter of a certain major company, and after falling in love at first sight with my husband, came after him for marriage. By that time, he was already dating me, and my husband firmly said,
Sarah is the one for me.
and tried to reject her. But ever since then, my father-in-law has never warmed up to me. That's why he would try to come over to the house when nobody else was around and try to make my life as miserable as possible. One day, my father-in-law came over for the same routine. My husband was at work as usual, and my mother-in-law had gone to her flower arrangement lesson that she had started as a hobby. After showing up unexpectedly, I thought he had quietly relaxed in the living room. But once again,
Where is the tea? Why hasn't it been offered yet? You lazy rat. Why the heck is a woman like you my son's wife? You're ugly, you're slow, and you're the worst.
I'm sorry, sir. I really wanted to ask him to leave, but I can't. After a while, my baby had started to doze off, so I went up to the second floor to put him to sleep. Sir, please excuse me. I'm going to go upstairs to let my baby take his nap.
Whatever. Hurry up and go. Looking at your face just makes my health deteriorate by the second.
I figured my father-in-law was trying to force me into a corner so that I would divorce my husband. Of course, I love my husband. And when my father-in-law said that he was going to make his son marry the other princess, my mother-in-law came to my rescue. He already has a lovely woman named Sarah. There's no way you could force him to marry someone else. And vouched for us. Because he was the husband of such a wonderful mother-in-law, I wasn't able to speak up about my father-in-law's harassment. I let out a big sigh as I took my baby upstairs. When will he go home? After my baby had fallen asleep, I must have dozed off myself, and I don't know how long I was out for, but woke up when I realized something was off. Why does it smell like something is burning? When I finally came to my senses, I realized that the entire room was filled with smoke and a terrible burning smell. What is this? Could it be a house fire? I had no idea how a fire could have possibly started in the house, but I grabbed my baby and wrapped him up in his blanket and tried to shield him from as much smoke as possible, and I ran downstairs. When I got to the ground floor, there was smoke covering every corner of the house. Because I was also carrying my baby, I accidentally inhaled some smoke, and it hurt so much that I was barely able to breathe. How did this happen? Because of the smoke, I couldn't see what was in front of me at all, and because the house was on fire, there is no way for me to make it to the front door. What do I do? I can't get through, and I can't breathe. I have to at least get my baby outside. I knew that if I didn't do something, both of us would die, so I desperately started calling out for my father-in-law. Sir! Father! Sir! Suddenly, on the other side of the blocked pathway, I saw my father-in-law's figure standing in the smoke. Father-in-law, help me! Please, I'm begging you! This area is blocked and I can't get through! Even if it's just my baby. Please, help me! With every word, smoke would fill my lungs and my throat would feel like it was burning along with the house. Tears were streaming down my face and I couldn't stop coughing. But I needed to save my baby no matter what. And all I needed was my father-in-law's help. If he would just reach out his hand, I would be able to pass him the baby. And at least my child would be safe. However, in the middle of the burning house and amidst all the smoke, my father-in-law let out a shocking line.
There's nothing I can do to help you. You're gonna have to save yourself.
When I heard these words, my mind went completely blank. Wait, I have my baby with me right here. Please, help me. Don't leave us here. We're gonna die. I screamed with every last bit of energy I had left in me, but my father-in-law went out of the house and disappeared outside. The door was right there in front of me, but a burning pillar was in the way and I couldn't get out of there. Around me was a sea of fire. My body was so hot and I was being suffocated by the heat and smoke that I truly thought I was gonna die. Stuck in the desperation of my father-in-law leaving us behind like this, I held my baby tightly in the blanket and pulled him closer. With whatever noises I could make through my burning throat, I tried to yell, "Someone, please, help! I can't do this anymore. It's over. But please, someone, anyone, at least the baby." Just as I was about to give up, I heard the voice of a firefighter exclaim,
There's a person in there!
This was followed by the feeling of water hitting my head and drenching my whole body, and I was saved while hanging onto my last bit of consciousness. I suffered from a few burns on my body, but somehow my baby was unharmed. I was placed in an ambulance that arrived at the same time, and the moment I laid down, I passed out. By the time I woke up, I was in the hospital bed while they were operating on the burns all over my body.
Are you awake? Sarah, can you hear me?
My husband was right next to me, and beside him, my mother-in-law was in tears. The baby, is he okay?
Yes, thanks to you, he's fine.
And then my husband told me something shocking. They found out the reason for the fire was because my father-in-law had fallen asleep while smoking a cigarette in the living room.
I'm so sorry. I know that this also means that my dad had been harassing you while I was at work. Mom and I had no idea that he was coming over to the house while we weren't there. That must have been so hard.
Apparently, my husband was on his way home from work when he was notified by a neighbor that our house was on fire. As soon as he heard that, he rushed home and was confused when he saw his father was being treated for minor wounds outside of the house. When he asked whether me and the baby were safe, his father said,
Who knows? Those two are still inside, so they probably won't be saved. Sheesh, finally got rid of her.
My husband couldn't believe his ears, and his world turned blood red.
What is that supposed to mean? Dad, what are you saying? You left them in there?
And lunged at his father, but he was stopped by the firefighters, and my father-in-law was taken directly to the hospital. Immediately after that, he saw me lying there, as I'd just been pulled out by the firefighters, and desperately held my unconscious body while yelling.
Sarah! Sarah!
He got onto the ambulance with me and the baby, and while I was getting treated for my heavy burns, he helped to clean up the baby's small wounds. Once they arrived at the hospital, my husband was told that the reason for the fire was because his father fell asleep while smoking inside the house, and he went straight to his father to get the truth out of him. The response shocked him.
This is all your fault for marrying a piece of trash like that woman. Even after the daughter of the president of that company said she would take you as her husband. Because you refused to break up with her, I was forced to go over there and try to make you guys break up by giving her a hard time.
Are you kidding me? How can you even begin to blame anybody else for this? Our house burned down because of your stupidity for falling asleep while smoking a cigarette, and inside nonetheless. Sarah and our baby were about to die because of you!
Well, then she should have hurried up and died. And then you could finally be alone again. But anyway, she's probably got some pretty ugly burns after that house fire, so it's probably a good time to throw her away anyway.
You bastard!
This time, my husband did not hold back in showing his father exactly how he was feeling. However, my father-in-law was still technically a hospital patient, so a panicked nurse came rushing over to stop him. But by that time, I heard that my father-in-law's face was already covered in blood. When he was released from the hospital, my father-in-law was taken to court for falling asleep while smoking a cigarette, and therefore causing the fire. Upon further questioning, they found out that he didn't actually fall asleep while smoking the cigarette, but rather that he had purposely placed a burning cigarette on the sofa, and he was taken to prison for arson. Before he was sent off, my husband got at least one word into his own father.
I hope you rotten president go straight to hell! And don't you ever try to come back to this family ever again!
My mother-in-law also decided to get a divorce from her terrible husband, and for days and weeks following the incident, she kept falling to her knees repeating, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry," as she continued to apologize. Because of the fire, I was also left with some pretty ugly burns and scars on my arms and legs, but I have no regrets because my baby was fine and came out unharmed. And of course, my husband loves me just the same. If anything, I feel like he treasures us even more. I have no intention of forgiving my father-in-law for the rest of my life. And I would have been happy for him to get beat till his last breath, somewhere, although not by my husband. However, 3 years later, we heard that my father-in-law had a stroke while in prison and took his last breath there. I didn't actually think my father-in-law would be sent to hell so quickly, and nobody went to claim his body, so I have no idea what happened after that, but I thought it was quite the fitting end to his story.
My wife cheated on me. The reason I found out was that the wife of my wife's lover contacted me with all the evidence and informed me that her husband and my wife were having an affair. At that time, I was living together with my wife, our 5-year-old daughter, and a 3-year-old son. The 4 of us were living happily together as a family. Of course, at first I didn't believe that my wife was having an affair, but the evidence spoke for itself. Then, thinking the rumors might be true, I looked into the savings and other things I usually leave to my wife. Then, just as I expected, I found out that my wife gave the inheritance she got from her parents, my secret savings, and bonus savings to her lover. Also, I found a mother-child handbook hidden in the back of the wardrobe, and found out that she's 3 months pregnant. Come to think of it, she's been turning me down for months now. What's more is that her lover made his wife work while he went out to gamble. I heard from his wife that they are knee-deep in debt. My wife gave her parents' inheritance and my savings to that gambler lover of hers. Of course, there was no way I was gonna forgive her, so I grilled her with questions. Then,
ever since I met him, I felt a thrill that I had forgotten.
she was really drunk in love with her lover, and while touching her stomach happily, she uttered,
Besides, I have a child with the man in my stomach. We've been trying for about a year now, but we couldn't make a baby, so this baby inside me is connected to that man in me.
She said that in an entranced state. When I heard those words going out of her mouth, I thought that I couldn't handle it anymore, so I contacted my parents-in-law. My parents-in-law flew from the other side of the country, and my wife got a big slap on her cheek.
What in the world are you thinking? How peaceful do you think you're doing thanks to Joshua? You even have 2 children with him. What are you dissatisfied about, stupid?
A peaceful life is boring. Thanks for meeting that man. I am now living every day like I'm in heaven. I can't go back to the time before that man and I met.
What a stupid daughter!
My father-in-law slapped her again to make her see the reality, but my wife continued to be in a daze. My mother-in-law apologized on their daughter's behalf.
Joshua, I'm truly sorry for the behavior of my daughter. I will apologize on her behalf. I'm very sorry for what she had done.
Honestly, just because my parents-in-law apologized to me doesn't mean the situation has changed. That man's baby resides in the stomach of my wife. With that crazy situation, I can't continue living under the same roof as my wife. I had no other choice but to file for divorce and give up on our marriage. Whatever you say, things won't change. The reality is that your daughter betrayed me and our children, so I will file for divorce. Of course, I will demand alimony from her, and I won't leave our children to her care.
But, so does that mean we won't see my grandchildren anymore?
Yes, that's exactly what it means. Since it has come to this, I don't want to get involved with my wife anymore.
What? Oh, no. No.
My parents-in-law were shedding tears, but they're not the only ones who were able to keep up with a situation that suddenly robbed them of happiness. I, too, am in the same situation as them. However, since we have children and I need to be strong for them, I was just acting like I was calm on the outside. But deep inside, I felt like my world was falling apart. When my wife said,
I am going to give birth to that man's child, you know. I, of course, need to rest and take care of my body for the child. So, I don't have the means to pay for alimony. I'll give the children to you, so no need to pay alimony to you, right?
I was deeply enraged that I felt like wanting to crack her head open and shove sense into it. Listen! Children are not things, and they're not compensation for alimony. You betrayed us, your family, and we have every right to claim alimony. Then my father-in-law added to what I said.
You betrayed Joshua and your children! There's no way this selfishness can be forgiven!
So, are you saying that I should just leave the baby in my stomach to die? If I force myself to work and end up having a miscarriage, I'm going to demand alimony from you. $1 billion!
Stupid! Do you even understand what you're saying? Your affair started all this problem!
Toward the end, my in-laws were so pissed at my wife that it was pandemonium. In the end, my in-laws ended up paying for the alimony for now, and they'll collect money from their daughter afterwards. Then my wife and I got a divorce, and I got custody of the children. Our children are still very young and couldn't stay home by themselves without adult supervision. So I hired a nanny to send them to and from the kindergarten and take care of them until I get home. It was the first for me to hire a nanny, so I was worried if things would be alright, but the nanny was very kind and looked like a good person. The children also seemed to like her immediately, so I was able to concentrate on my work to support my 2 children. My wife was suddenly out of the picture, so I was very worried about my children and how to go about things, but thanks to the nanny, our house was always clean. Excuse me? Cleaning the house is not part of the job description, so the pay is only for babysitting.
No, it's fine. I'm just doing it when I have the time. I'm sorry, I did say something without your permission.
No, you don't have to be sorry. I'm truly thankful to you. Whenever I come home, the house is always clean and you even cook for us. I didn't ask you to do all this, so I'm sorry.
I'm also cooking for myself, so please, keep this a secret from my boss.
Sure, my mouth is zipped and your secret is safe with me. I don't know anything about cooking, so could you please hand me the receipt if you go out to the grocery store with the kids?
Sure. So, is there anything you would like me to cook? You're always working so very hard, so would you like me to cook something healthy?
Well then, could you please cook me some roasted salmon with some vegetables on the side? I love that simple dish.
Got it. Your order has been heard.
While I was living a fulfilling life every day with the children, I received information about my ex-wife from my relatives. During that time, my ex-wife's belly grew bigger and bigger. My ex-in-laws told her to have an abortion, but since she was told by the father of the baby that they'll receive funds from the government, she gave birth to the child. I heard that after her lover got divorced from his wife, they lived in together. However, the man lied that he was working for a company, but the truth was that he was living under public assistance. My ex-wife found that out, and they fought almost every day. Their neighbors heard them yelling at each other in their houses, and the sound of plates breaking as the fight escalated. Even in that situation, her lover continued to gamble. Before they knew it, they were out of money. Both of them still had alimony to pay to me and the man's ex-wife, so their financial situation worsened even more. One day, a baby's cries were heard from their house, so the neighbors called the cops to check what was happening. Then, the cops found a baby alone inside the room. It was a very hot summer day, so the couple left the windows open. Despite that, the room was filled with very hot air. The cops immediately called an ambulance, and the baby was directly brought to the hospital to be checked. Then, my in-laws received a call from the hospital. During that time, the baby's father won the lottery, so he and my ex-wife went out to eat. He even said,
The baby's always crying! So noisy! Just leave her in the house! She won't die if we just keep the windows open!
It was already past midnight when they arrived home. That's because after they ate out, they went straight to the hotel. Of course, the two of them were arrested immediately. They argued like,
The baby didn't die, so it's not a problem!
but I honestly think they should go to hell for treating a baby like that. Thankfully, the baby was alright. But since my ex-in-laws were already quite old, the baby was taken to an orphanage. The head of the orphanage is very good at taking care of children, so I'm sure the baby will grow up happily, as opposed to growing up in the hands of my stupid ex-wife and her lover. That's also the reason why my ex-in-laws decided to leave the baby under the orphanage's care. No matter who the baby's father is, that baby is still their grandchild, so they care so much. They can't meet with my children, so at least they have a grandchild they can meet. This happened a bit later on, but I heard that my ex-in-laws visit their youngest grandchild in the orphanage from time to time. I believe that the baby will be fine because there are people who love her unconditionally. As for me, after all that drama happening in my life, I had more time to communicate with the children's nanny. We ended up falling for each other and we started dating. I can't be in a relationship with someone without thinking of the future. It'll also be for the kids. I'm thinking about marriage in the future. Are you okay with that?
Of course, yes.
Leslie replied happily. 2 years after that, Leslie and I got married and we were blessed with a baby the next year. Our children, who used to be 5 years old and 3 years old, are now big brothers and big sisters to the baby. They welcome the new member of the family with open arms and even help out taking care of the baby. The 5 of us are now living happily.
I live with my dad, mom, and older brother. My brother was a senior in high school, and when I was in 9th grade, an incident occurred. There was a problem that my brother was harassing someone at school, and it was a girl. We found out that Karen told her mother.
A boy is harassing me, and I don't want to go to school.
When I came home after school, the house was in a huge commotion, and I didn't know what was going on, but then I heard about my brother. Apparently, my brother would call this Karen person ugly, or point at her face or ignore her in group activities. Unlike me, my brother was smart. He would usually remember something he learned once without having to study too hard. But in the meantime, he was bullying Karen. My brother has never been a bully or harassed anyone before, so I couldn't understand why he would do something so awful. But no matter the situation, my brother was in the wrong for harassing someone so much that they no longer wanted to come to school. The school called a meeting for my brother, my parents, Karen, and her parents to speak, and I heard that my brother got down on his knees to apologize to her. My brother also seemed shocked, not realizing how much he was upsetting her. Karen's side seemed content with my brother's genuine apology, and they agreed to part ways and stay separated. However, this was only the beginning of our family problems. Ever since my mom found out about my brother's harassment, she was so angry that her attitude towards him changed completely. Bullying someone like that! Did you ever put yourself in her shoes? To you, it might have just been a joke, but to the other girl, you put scars on her that might last a lifetime. You are no longer my son! She was yelling at him like a completely different person. Of course, my brother was admitting to his actions and was trying his best to apologize to her, but my mom wouldn't forgive him at all. From that day, my mom started treating my brother and only my brother differently. For one, she stopped speaking to him. She wouldn't even make eye contact with him, only to give him empty responses, and would make enough dinner for everyone except my brother. She would do everyone's dishes except for his, and leave them out all day until she would finally wash them with a glove. It was the same with his laundry. And for our school lunch, she would throw him $5 while she would still make me lunch. Sure, my brother was wrong, but I feel like my mom's behavior was way too extreme. Even when she was speaking to me normally, if my brother came home, she would fully ignore him and turn on the TV. Up until now, she had given my brother a monthly allowance of $60 and me $30, but even that was taken away. And even though he was busy studying for university exams, he had to start working a part-time job. He wasn't even allowed to go to the prep school that had been promised for years. My dad finally stepped in.
Enough is enough! John feels guilty enough already. Just apologize. What kind of parent are you to say that you'll never forgive your own child?
That boy was bullying his own classmate! That's not forgivable! My mom seemed just as angry as the first time. I couldn't understand why she was still so angry. As promised, in front of everyone ever since then, my brother never went anywhere near Karen or even tried speaking to her. If anything, he's the one running away from her, which is what my brother's friends secretly told me. Eventually, I found out the reason for my mother's attitude. It turns out my mom was bullied by her classmates before too. It was a traumatizing experience for her, and as a result, she can't forgive anyone who is a bully, no matter who it is, nor can she accept it. In my mom's case, I heard that it was pretty bad. Having her clothes cut by her classmates or having water dumped on her. It sounded like drama straight out of a manga or the TV, to the point where she had even contemplated taking her own life at that time. So even though we don't know why my brother was harassing Karen, from my mom, she could only see him as evil. Knowing my mom's situation, it made me feel even more conflicted. She had ended up changing schools because she couldn't stand it anymore. So she never even got an apology from her bullies. But my brother was genuinely apologetic and felt bad. But no matter what my father and I tried, my mom wouldn't budge. My brother ended up taking out a loan, and in order to get away from my mom, he went to an out-of-state school. She didn't come with us to send him off, and instead said, "Don't ever show your face in front of me again." My father and I took my brother to the station. On our way, my brother apologized to me, saying,
I'm sorry for everything because of me.
When I heard that, I couldn't help but be filled with tears. A few years later, my brother came back home to visit. I was shocked because standing next to him was Karen. Wait, why? I couldn't understand why they would be standing next to each other, and I was just shocked. They came into the house, and we found out that the two had gotten married. My mom was also surprised, and for a moment she thought my brother had threatened her and came after him. But then Karen immediately stepped in to explain. Turns out that after my brother graduated high school, even in this generation of having cell phones, my brother had always handwritten many apology letters and sent them to her. At first, she hesitated to read the letters since they were from my brother. But since he kept sending so many, she finally tried reading some. In the letters, she said she could feel my brother's genuine apology, and he even confessed that he was treating her like a child because he had a crush on her. But he kept messing up his actions and instead ended up harassing her, and he kept apologizing and confessing his guilt over and over and over again. And so, Karen said she wrote him back to the same address and said that she would forgive him. The story was supposed to end there, but somehow they continued to write to each other. And my brother said that he wanted to thank her for replying, and that he would spend the rest of his life trying to make it up to her. Throughout their conversations, she heard about his situation with our mom. By that time, my brother had been using the long holidays to go and be with Karen, and that's when he told her everything. He knew that by bullying Karen, he brought out his mom's past trauma, and he admitted that it was his own wrongdoing. But he wanted nothing more than for his mom to go back to being the way she was before, and spoke to Karen in tears. Ever since she heard that, she wondered if she was anything she could do to help. From there, the two officially started dating, and then they got married. It was Karen who suggested that they should go see his mom.
It's true that John had been harassing me, and that because of him, I no longer wanted to go to school, and that's why I spoke to my parents. But even at the time, and for a long time after, John continued to apologize to me and carry the guilt. And now, I've been able to forgive him. Please, if not for him, then for me. Can you please forgive him?
Karen bowed her head to my mom, next to her.
I am truly sorry for what I've done, and I will never again in my life do such a thing.
My brother also bowed. His hands were shaking. Please, that's enough. The two of them slowly raised their faces towards my mom. You're right. John really did apologize properly, and has been sincere this whole time. I was wrong too. It's just that every time I would look at you, all I could see were the faces of the kids who bullied me. All this time, I'm so sorry. In turn, my mom bowed her head to the two of them. Seeing that, My brother was sobbing.
I'm so glad. To be honest, I was so scared of today.
I believe from the bottom of my heart that the reason my brother was able to come home was because of Karen. After being told by his mother to never show his face in front of her ever again, there was no way he could come back. Before I knew it, tears were also streaming down my face. And then Karen told us that she was carrying her and my brother's child in her stomach. My mom was shocked, and my dad was ecstatic. The two of them currently live in different states. But with the arrival of their baby, they had been talking about coming back to their hometown together. They told my mom this, and when she told them to come home, my brother continued crying. My brother and Karen were so in love that you would never think they had caused such problems in school. And while we were all surprised by the outcome, they were a perfect match for each other. Sometimes it was hard because I felt like their problems had destroyed our family. But seeing my mom speak to my brother for the first time in years made me overwhelmed with happiness.
I can't tell you the name of the company that I used to work for, but internal relationships were forbidden there. Everybody was desperate to hide theirs because if they were caught, one of the two would be fired immediately. That being said, from age 24 to 30, I spent 6 years at that company in a relationship with one of my colleagues. We were together the entire time, but managed to keep it a secret from everyone. However, when I turned 30 years old, we had been careful, but I found out that I was pregnant and discussed it with him. To be honest, I was really happy given my age of 30 and the fact that we had been together for so long. I had stupidly expected us to start talking about marriage, but this hope was quickly shattered by the worst possible response. This was right around the time that he was gunning for promotion. Knowing that he might lose his job if anybody found out about us, he started accusing me of getting pregnant on purpose.
I bet you can't even be sure that it's my kid! What a wicked woman you are, lying and trying to pressure me into marriage!
What? How can you say that? That's awful! I've only been with you and only you. I would never cheat on you. I couldn't believe the words coming out of his mouth, but he seemed to be overcome with rage and filled with resentment towards me. The same man that had been so kind and honest with me until now had transformed into a completely different person. And for the first time ever, I was terrified of him. I wanted to speak with him in a more calm setting, so after work that day, I stopped him on his way home and we headed to his house together. Then suddenly, just as we were about to go down the stairs at the train station, he purposely knocked into me and followed up with a firm push on the back. Wait! I didn't even have a moment to think about what had just happened, but I lost my balance and went tumbling down the stairs. I suffered an injury that required 7 stitches in the hospital. On top of that, when I fell down the stairs, I'd hit my stomach so hard that I suffered a miscarriage. Because it was the closest train station to our office, everybody found out about the miscarriage. And when I was discharged from the hospital, somehow he had become the hero who saved me that day. You pushed me down the stairs, didn't you? I could still feel his hands on my back when he pushed me down the stairs that day. Not to mention that he didn't come visit me once in the hospital, nor did he even bother asking about the baby. Even though it was our baby. However, on the other hand, he told everybody that he just happened to stumble upon me and was able to stay calm and give me the help that I needed. This caught the attention of our boss as well, and his promotion became even closer. Meanwhile, I was looked down upon as a woman who got pregnant without even being married and was labeled a loose whore around the office. After that, I was taken off of my chief position on projects that I'd been building, and it was blow after blow. Even then, I knew that it wouldn't solve anything if I quit my job. And knowing how hard it might be to find another full-time position, I gritted my teeth and put my head down to continue working. In the midst of all of this, I was approached by him and he said,
Now that the child is gone too, we should probably break up, right?
I was so shocked by all this. All I could say was, yeah, the baby is gone and you have nothing else to say about it?
Of course not. After all, it was a kid that you made by having an affair anyway. It has nothing to do with me. Anyway, I have a promotion on the line, so don't come near me anymore.
He spat this at me and stormed off with no responsibility. My love for that man had all disappeared from the incident at the train station, so I wasn't heartbroken, but instead I was angry. I couldn't forgive him for what he'd done. He thought that me and the baby were getting in the way of his promotion. That's why in that moment he tried to erase the existence of our child. After we broke up, his promotion became even more of a reality. I didn't know how I could get my revenge. It wasn't as simple as revealing to everybody that we were dating. Just like he made me and the baby fall from the top of the stairs that day, I wanted him to feel the same pain of what it was like to fall from the top into a black hole of desperation. Shortly after, he started dating our boss's niece, and they were quick to get engaged. The boss was thrilled and his promotion was within arm's reach. But the moment his marriage was decided, he must have gotten scared because I received a message from him not too long after.
I want you to meet me after work.
He had some nerve. Of course I said okay, and I turned on the recording device on my cell phone and went to go meet him.
I'm sorry about what happened in the past.
What do you mean, what happened in the past? Please clearly state what you did.
You know, I broke up with you and it was very one-sided.
Is that all?
And, you know, about the child and stuff.
What do you mean, there is no child anymore?
Well, you know, I mean getting you pregnant and stuff.
You tried to threaten me that it wasn't even your child, didn't you? And getting me pregnant? I think you've gotten it all wrong here. If you're going to apologize, you should be apologizing about pushing me down the train station stairs. Isn't that right? You thought that me and the baby were going to get in the way of your promotion, so you purposely bumped into me to force a miscarriage, didn't you?
Well, it wasn't on purpose or anything.
I can still feel the palms of your hands flat against my back. And on top of that, even after the miscarriage, you didn't come to visit me in the hospital, not even once. Isn't that more proof than anything? You were happy, weren't you? That the baby, your baby, disappeared without a trace? If you're dating someone from the ages of 24 to 30, you would think that you would take a little responsibility if a baby was made. He pulled out a thin envelope from his pocket and placed it on the table.
Look, with this, can we just pretend like it never happened and put this all in the past? Please, I'm asking you not to tell anyone. That's what I came here to ask you today.
When I looked at the thin, flimsy envelope, I couldn't help but laugh. We were dating for 6 years, but to him, this was all I was even worth? And that baby's life also reduced to just a few pathetic pieces of paper? All right, I'll think about it. And I walked out of the cafe. As expected, he tried to chase after me when I stepped out of the shop and I felt his hands on my shoulders and made my move. Ah! Don't hurt me! I screamed this as I dove down the stairs from the second-floor cafe. Everybody heard my voice and saw my body tumbling down the staircase. Someone who saw it called an ambulance, and I was taken in the ambulance to the hospital, while somebody else had called the police, so he was taken to the police station for assault. Of course, he insisted that he didn't push me down the stairs. Well, to be fair, I did dive down myself. But a number of police had come to the hospital room as well, so with tears streaming down my face, I pulled out the voice recording and made sure to fully play out the part of the victim. I told them how we used to be dating, but in order to break it off, he nearly killed me, and ever since then I was so scared and had been keeping my distance. Then I explained that he called me out to talk and tried to threaten me and bribe me not to tell anyone that he was the father of the child that I miscarried. And the grand finale, that I got scared and left the cafe. And that was when he pushed me down the stairs. I may have left up a few parts of the story, but it wasn't so far from the truth anyway. He was promptly arrested, and after that, his parents came to visit me in the hospital. I couldn't tell if they were even there to apologize, but they pulled out a settlement agreement and asked me to sign it. I explained everything that their son had put me through up until now and refused. In the end, he had to pay $50,000 for breaking the engagement, and then $50,000 as a settlement from the first miscarriage. He owed me $100,000 from this in total. Of course, his engagement to our boss's niece was also ruined. Our boss's anger was probably the worst part. "I'll never forgive you for embarrassing and hurting my precious niece," he said. And teaming up with her parents, they sued him for a hefty amount for destroying the engagement. As for him, because of this incident, all of our colleagues and everyone around found out about our relationship. They learned it all, how long we were dating and hiding it from everyone, how he tried to eliminate his own baby for the sake of his own promotion. how he pushed me down the stairs and forced the miscarriage. It all came to light, and the office became so miserable for him that he stopped coming to work at all. After he stopped coming to work, I'd been labeled as a loose whore in the past. But that all disappeared as well. I even had some colleagues come up to me.
I'm sorry I believed those rumors without knowing anything at all. I'm really sorry to hear about your baby.
I'm really sorry for saying such hurtful things about you. It wasn't right.
And a few people came to apologize. To be honest, I wonder if I overdid it by diving from the top of the staircase. But I think this revenge was only possible because of that desperation. I did receive a large amount of money from him and his parents, but that doesn't make my baby come back. Nor does it make the pain or suffering I endured go away. But at the end of the day, I was able to get my revenge, and that felt good. I didn't run away from work or my job, even when everybody was against me, so I know that I truly do deserve my place in the company. According to the rumors in the grapevine, after losing his promotion and his wedding, and the trust of anybody around him, I heard that he moved back into his parents' house and fell into such a deep depression that he can't even take one step out of the house anymore. What goes around comes around, and I can't say I feel too sorry for him when he did this to himself. I don't think I'll be able to ever forget about the baby that I lost for the rest of my life. But even so, I hope to keep moving forward with my life in a positive way. One day, my husband and brother-in-law came home together and told me that there was something they wanted to talk to me about. Besides my husband, his brother had also brought my niece with them, so I wondered what it was about. I had a few guesses in my mind, as my husband sent our niece out of the living room into our kids' room. I figured maybe this was about bullying, but the reality was so much worse than that. It all started last month, when my niece had a rash at school and was sent home early. She came home to her mother, my sister-in-law, having sex with her cheating partner, and she saw it all. My niece was in her second year of middle school, but she had never had a boyfriend yet, and she was a pretty sheltered kid with ideals of love. This innocent niece saw her mother and a man she didn't know slamming their bodies against each other. It was a sight straight out of hell. Ever since then, my niece would have to throw up just at the sight of her own mother. It wasn't until a few days after the incident that my brother-in-law noticed. In the beginning, her mother had told her to keep her mouth shut, so my niece wasn't able to speak about the affair or what she had seen to her father. Her hatred towards her mother only grew, and because of the stress, she started throwing up frequently. And because of that, she was also unable to go to school. At the same time, she couldn't stay home and be near her mom, so she'd go to the library and sit alone by herself all day until she was reported to her school. When my brother-in-law found out about the entire situation, he was shocked. At the time, he was on a business trip in the neighboring state. But since the mom didn't pick up on the phone when the school called, they called the second emergency contact, which was the father, and explained everything to him. My brother-in-law said to me that his daughter now throws up just by being home and remembering what she saw, and asked if we wouldn't mind letting her stay with us for a while. He kept looking down and could see the pain written all over him, but there was no way that we would ever want our niece to stay in such a hellish environment. So of course, we agreed. Luckily, we live in the suburbs, so we had plenty of room for her, and because our kids were still really little, they were a lot younger than her. At first, they hesitated and would ask if they could play with her, but in no time they became really close, and would always chase after her or beg her to play with them. It seems like my niece also likes kids, and I'm grateful that she actually enjoys playing with them. It's a huge help to have her looking after them around the house. Ever since the incident, my niece hadn't been going to school, but because she hadn't done anything wrong in the situation, her father couldn't force her to go. He was also stuck in a difficult situation. We lived in a different district from my brother-in-law's families, so the school districts were different as well. Regardless, we also didn't want to force our traumatized niece to go to school either. Back in the day, I used to work part-time as a tutor for high school students, so I was able to help my niece with her middle school studies and homeschool her a little. Thanks to my husband, I was a full-time housewife anyways, So even during the weekdays, I was able to teach my niece. To which she said, "I love the way you teach, Michelle. It's so easy to understand." Really? I did used to work part-time as an in-house tutor. My niece was a great student, and the more I taught her, the more she would swiftly absorb it. On the weekends, we would make an effort to go out of the house as a family, including my niece. Well, let's go to the park today to look at the cherry blossoms. I'll pack a few lunch boxes and we can have lunch in the park. You're going to make lunch boxes? I want to help. Of course, let's do it together. On the weekdays, we would study at home, and on the weekends, we would go out. And as we repeated this, my niece slowly started to show her old self again. Her appetite was much better than what it was when she first arrived at our house, and it seemed like she was finally able to sleep normally, too. On the other hand, my brother-in-law was moving forward with his divorce from his cheating wife. We couldn't believe it, but my brother-in-law found out that his wife was stealing from the savings account that he had been slowly building up for his daughter's college funds in order to pay for the hotels for her affair. There should have been $20,000 in the account, but he found it to be completely emptied out. That's when the two of them had run out of money to have their affair elsewhere. So she'd brought the man into her house and was caught by her daughter. Apparently, my sister-in-law tried to stand her ground, saying, If she hadn't come home early from school, nobody would have found out. When I heard that from my brother-in-law, I knew that they could not let a woman like that have custody of the child. That being said, my brother-in-law was a director at his company with a fairly high status, but it also meant that he had a lot of business trips. If he were to take her in by himself, it would mean that he would be leaving an 8th grade girl at home all alone for multiple nights in a row. He seemed to be really stressed out about it, so we told him, "Don't worry, our family will support you in any way that we can. So no matter what, don't let your wife win the custody battle." When my husband and I said that to his little brother, my brother-in-law hung his head low once again and apologized.
I'm so sorry for all the trouble we've caused you and your family. It's our precious niece's future on the line. If not for you, then we would do anything for her too. So please, give your ex-wife the punishment she deserves. I'll do my best.
After that, my brother-in-law sued not only his wife's cheating partner, but also his wife, and collected a settlement fee from the both of them. The lawyer sympathized with the fact that the child saw the exact scene of her own mother's affair, and he went after the two of them for every penny that he could. Apparently, my sister-in-law was way more into her partner and was the one to pay for all of the hotels and whatever else. As for him, the company found out about the affair, and because he worked at a rival company from her husband, he was fired. Thanks to the lawyer, he still had a hefty settlement fee to pay. As for the wife, her parents came down from the suburbs to her house, and she had to explain to them the reason for the divorce. This made her mother explode. "You showed a child one of the most horrific things in the world! What the hell were you thinking? Have some shame! Apologize to your husband and apologize to my grandchild!" And apparently jumped on top of her, mounting her like a horse, as she delivered blow after blow. Her father got down on both knees to my brother-in-law, saying,
I'm so sorry about this worthless daughter of mine. We will pay whatever fees you want to collect from her. I don't care what happens to this one anymore. But please, just take care of our grandchild.
And so the divorce was finalized, and my brother-in-law was able to collect a settlement fee from both his ex-wife and her partner. She was promptly kicked out of the house as soon as the divorce was finalized, and apparently she thought that she could just crawl right into her partner's place. But he was living in a company apartment. He was, of course, kicked out of this place as well after being fired. The both of them were left with nowhere to sleep and no money or income to spare. As a result, my sister-in-law lost her family, her house, and her money at the same time. But a woman her age wasn't able to find a high-paying job so easily, not even in the nightclubs or lounges. I heard a rumor that she was hanging out around the homeless these days. To be honest, I think she got exactly what she deserved. After all, she put her hands on her own daughter's college funds and wiped it clean, and showed her daughter a horrific scene that no child should ever have to walk into. After that, our niece officially moved into our house. My brother-in-law was debating whether or not to quit his job, considering how many business trips he had, and the amount of overseas trips that were about to increase. He didn't feel like he'd be able to look after his daughter like this. My husband and I both stopped him. If you're not going to be here all the time because of your business trips, then we would be happy to take our niece in officially and raise her the way we've been doing these last few months. And whenever you're back from your business trips, you can just stay here with us too.
But then, the weight that the two of you have to carry.
Not once have we ever felt like it was any weight at all. If anything, we're just happy that our family has gotten bigger. I'm sure that you think quitting your job could be an option, but in order for your daughter to be able to have a bright future, you're going to need some money. So let's all help each other. We're all family after all.
Seriously, thank you so much. I don't even know where to start with thanking you.
My brother-in-law thanked us through tears. Our niece transferred to the school in our district and has been going back to school now. We knew that we couldn't erase her trauma and that she was still holding in a lot of stress. But the change of environment seemed to be a really positive thing for her, and she was able to make friends quickly, and was even looking forward to going to school in the mornings. Our kids were thrilled when they found out that their favorite cousin would be moving in, and they followed her around even more than they did before. Our niece was an only child who said she had always wanted siblings, so she didn't seem to mind. Her father wasn't around much, and I guess her mother didn't pay much attention to her either, so I can only imagine how lonely she must have felt in her own home. In our house, our two sons were a handful, and the house was always bustling with someone yelling, or crying, or laughing. For my niece, maybe that was exactly what she needed. It's not going to be an easy road ahead, but we're going to do our best to support and protect our niece in any way that we can. And at the very least, we want to make sure that she doesn't feel the same pain that she did when she was with her mother. My brother-in-law has also been able to put his all into his work, knowing that my husband and I are looking after his precious daughter. Of course, when he's home, we are one big family, and it feels like a party every night.
How was today's video? If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Stay tuned for more.